George joins Joel Embiid on the shelf at the end of a miserable campaign for their wing for the rest of the season after he took injections in his left knee and adductor. I hope I pronounced that correctly. George, 16 points per game in his first season in Philly. That's his lowest output in a decade.
Paul George's season is officially over, and his career with the Philadelphia 76ers might be too. But could the Philadelphia 76ers even unload his contract if they tried? Well, the good news is it seems like the Sixers are making smarter decisions with their team, but Paul George's future with this team might be in jeopardy. So before we get to the content, make sure you check out our brand new baseball channel, Uni Diamond Talk. We're still giving away multiple copies of MLB The Show 25 to a subscriber that turns on their notifications on that channel. And now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Today's video is sponsored by PrizePicks. We've been having a dominant run making easy money on our NBA props that I give away on my Instagram at TheFlightMike and on my Patreon at Microphone. Make sure you use my promo code Microphone to get $50 when you make a play of $5 or more, or just click in the link in the description down below. And thank you, PrizePicks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? It has been a very difficult year for Philadelphia 76ers fans. I mean, throughout the entire Joel Embiid era, they've been finally waiting for Tobias Harris's contract to expire so they could pursue some additional help to put alongside Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. And when that opportunity finally struck, they just couldn't help themselves but to pay Paul George a maximum contract despite being 34 years old. Now look, in some instances, paying a veteran a significant amount of money could pay off. I mean, the Phoenix Suns paid Chris Paul a large sum of money following their NBA Finals appearance when he was 36 years old. Although his contract wasn't fully guaranteed, he was theoretically under contract until the age of 40, and it worked out really well. They were contenders with Chris Paul as their point guard. It was a no-brainer for the Phoenix Suns to do this. And in the case of the Philadelphia 76ers, I guess you could say they were just desperate, or that Paul George just bamboozled them in his final year with the Clippers. I mean, Paul George had his best season as a Los Angeles Clipper in his final year. I mean, in year 1 with the Clippers, he played in 48 games. In year 2, he played in 54 games. In year 3, he played in 31 games. In year 4, he played in 56 games. In his final season with the Clippers, this man played in 74 games. And mind you, Kawhi Leonard was out for a large number of those games, so he was the top option with the Clippers. In this season, he had his best career averages from beyond the arc, shooting 41% from 3, averaging 22.6 points per game, and bringing in positive offensive box plus minus and defensive box plus minus numbers. Paul George was named an all-star at the age of 33. There was no question in anyone's mind that he deserved to get a huge contract once the season concluded. And by the way, it wasn't just the Philadelphia 76ers that were after him. I mean, the Golden State Warriors were interested in him, and they were pissed off when they didn't get him. I mean, you guys remember what Draymond Green said on his podcast after Paul George signed with the Sixers?
As you all know, Paul George was going to come to the Warriors, and we wanted Paul George to come to the Warriors. For us to get Paul George, it would have taken a sign and trade, and the Clippers didn't really want to play ball. And, you know, whereas you could have gotten something back for Paul George walking, they get absolutely nothing back. So
it's not like the Philadelphia 76ers made a boneheaded mistake. It was just the market for Paul George was so inflated that they really needed to make an aggressive move if they wanted to improve their chances to be contenders in the Eastern Conference. But they could have never predicted what would happen next. Paul George would have one of the worst seasons of his career with the Philadelphia 76ers. He would average 16 points per game, shoot 36% from 3. He would shoot 43% from the field, and he had a negative offensive box plus minus of a negative 0.4, a 0.1 defensive box plus minus, and a negative 0.3 box plus minus. His value over replacement player, which was a 3.3 the year prior, dropped all the way to a 0.6. And if you're just saying I'm looking at stats and I'm not actually watching the games, I mean, bro, it's not that difficult to find lowlights of Paul George. He's been terrible this year. The icing on the cake here was the fact that Tobias Tobias Harris has been flourishing with the resurgent Detroit Pistons, which just seems to be another chapter in the Philadelphia 76ers just letting the wrong player go. I mean, he's averaging 14 points per game, but he's shooting 47% from the field, and although his offensive box plus minus is lower than Paul George's, his VORP is higher than Paul George's, and he's not making Paul George money. And throughout the entire season, I think the worst part of all is not just the fact that Paul George was podcasting, but the manner at which Paul George was podcasting. Just 1 month into the season, when the Philadelphia 76ers were struggling, the one glimmer of hope that the Sixers had was Jared McCain. Despite them having a 2-12 record, Jared McCain started out his career averaging 24.4 points per game off of 48% shooting and 4.1 assists. And how did Paul George react? Well, by saying this.
To be quite frank, like, he's been our most consistent player on the team so far. We definitely got to step our up because the young fella is like that. He can't be our most consistent player. Like, we all got to step our shit up.
And mind you, this is on a video where he clickbaits the fact that his new team is doing horribly. I mean, the title of this video is Paul George Gets Real on the Players Only Meeting Leak, Sixers Struggles and More, featuring Reggie Jackson. I mean, it's just diabolical to talk about this when your team is performing so terribly. And to shit on your best offseason acquisition is just insane. Now, we all know Jared McCain would eventually be ruled out for the remainder of the season, and the Sixers would get hit with a nasty injury bug, but eventually the heat on Paul George just got so terrible, primarily because the Sixers were expected to contend, but between the injuries to Jared McCain and then Joel Embiid and then Paul George, this team could just never gel and establish team chemistry. And I can't help but feel like Nick Nurse is going to be the fall guy moving forward here. But eventually, Paul George decided, you know what? Enough is enough. It's time for me to lock in. I mean, this team just signed me to a huge contract so I could lead them to a championship. After all, I'm Paul George. I'm Playoff P. I'm known for signature playoff moments like this. Or this.
Paul George.
Don't be in a hurry.
4 seconds, 3 seconds, pull up jumper short.
Or, oh my God, my personal favorite, this.
Though.
George, way off. It's the side of the backboard.
So Paul George decided to completely cancel his podcast, and he wanted to lock in on bringing the Philadelphia 76ers a championship.
Fellas, it's no secret. This season is up to this point, man. It hasn't been what we envisioned. I know my goal when I first signed with Philadelphia was to bring a championship to these amazing fans here. I still remain positive about that, and that is still the case and where I'm coming from. With that being said, though, I want to let the Podcast P family know that after today's episode with Dwight, I plan to take a break from the pod just to focus on getting my body right, getting mentally right, and, you know, help this squad make a push towards our goal to finish the season out, give ourselves a chance to be in contentions to compete for a championship.
And honestly, my take on this situation is exactly identical to what was said on Bill Simmons' podcast.
Paul George is like a cat. He'll jump on your lap every once in a while. He's super lovable. Other times you're like, where's Paul George? Oh, he's in the garage.
Because I just felt like this was such an inappropriate time to say you're gonna lock in. I mean, your team was at the very bottom of the Eastern Conference. When Paul George decided to quit podcasting, the Sixers were 20-37. They were 12th in the Eastern Conference. There was absolutely no hope for them whatsoever to potentially make it into the NBA playoffs. And then you factor in the fact that this is a team that has a top 6 protected pick that goes to the Thunder this year if it falls out of the top 6 in the NBA draft. You combine that with the fact that this draft actually has some pretty solid players at the very top that could help the Philadelphia 76ers immediately, and it's really a no-brainer that this team needs to tank. My personal theory is the fact that he saw that there were players that could easily fill his void moving forward. I mean, the projected 4th overall pick in this draft is Ace Bailey. When you open up Ace Bailey's NBA Draft.net profile and you scroll down, you can see his NBA comparisons, Brandon Miller / Paul George, which, don't get me wrong, I think Ace Bailey being in the starting lineup with Paul George and Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid could make for a mean two-way lineup moving forward. But I had this like cute little theory that Paul George saw that there's a clone of him coming into the NBA NBA draft, and that's when he decided to step up all of a sudden. But what makes this even funnier is Paul George would quit podcasting, and in the 19 days that he would quit podcasting, he would play in 3 games. In these 3 games where he announced that he was taking a break from his podcast P with Paul George for a Sixers championship run, he averaged 19.7 points per game, 6.7 rebounds per game, 5.3 assists per game, 2 steals per game, off of 43.5% shooting from the field and 40% shooting from 3. He made 67% of his free throws, and he played 33 minutes per game. And then the Sixers said, you know what, enough is enough. I mean, they've won 3 of their last 10 games. This team is clearly headed for nowhere, and I think they kind of realized that they need to lose games quickly. There's no way you're going to be catching the top 4 in the NBA. I mean, Utah, Washington, Charlotte, and New Orleans are going to be the top 4 picks in the NBA draft no matter what. Then there's Philadelphia, Brooklyn, and Toronto. So if you're the Philadelphia 76ers, you want to do anything you possibly can to lose out for the remainder of the season, because that'll give you a 39.9% chance of a top 4 pick in the NBA draft. If you get a top 4 pick in this year's NBA draft, in my opinion, you are guaranteed to get yourself a potential all-star. I haven't done my videos on the NBA draft yet. I think Cooper Flagg is a guaranteed all-star. I think Dylan Harper and VJ Edgecombe have the potential to become all-stars, and I think Ace Bailey could be developed into an all-star. But of course, that's going to be a different video for another day. In my opinion, the top 4 picks could become somebody in this league, but whenever you draft a player that could contribute right away and he's on a rookie scale contract, then you have a ton of capital to invest elsewhere in your team, and honestly, that is not an opportunity that the Sixers could let pass. So the 76ers finally made the right decision here, and I can't believe it took them this long to do it. So Paul George received injections in his left adductor muscle and left knee on Monday and has been ruled out for the rest of the season. George is expected to be out at least 6 weeks. This should have been done about a month ago, and personally I replied to this on Twitter saying thank God, I was worried my favorite podcast would never come back. Look man, I am not against NBA players having podcasts. I actually think it's really cool, but it's kind of weird if you are podcasting when you aren't succeeding on the basketball court. It gives off the wrong image and the wrong vibe. Growing up in a Middle Eastern household, school was very important to my family. When I was in high school, my dad was always on ass about studying. And the thing was, he wouldn't care if I would go out late on weekends and have a good time with my friends, so long as I was bringing A's consistently. So long as I was getting my stuff done, then I could go out and party as much as I want. And he would not bother me because I was still getting my stuff done. But the thing is, if you are flunking each and every class and then you're partying on top of that, your parents are probably going to come up to you and say, hey, the reason you're flunking each and every class is because you're not locked in on your studies. And the same could be applied here. I don't mind when Jalen Brunson gets together with Josh Hart and records a podcast, primarily because Jalen Brunson is having a career year for himself, and the New York Knicks are currently a 3 seed. I don't mind when Draymond Green gets on the mic and does a podcast because, well, I feel like he needs a podcast. There's a lot of explaining he needs to do for some of the stuff he does on the basketball court. But whenever you're having one of the worst years of your career, when you are performing terribly, and on top of that, you are consistently recording podcast episodes that are just completely out of touch, like clickbaiting the fact that you're 2-12 to start the season and that you guys had a players only meeting. That's where I draw the line. And the thing that doesn't make a lot of sense to me is the fact that, one, Paul George has always been one of the worst players on the mic. I mean, some of the stuff this man says is absolutely insane. This was his reaction to Damian Lillard hitting a buzzer beater on him 6 years ago.
I mean, that's a bad shot.
This isn't a guy that's known for his mic skills either, and it's not like he's getting paid a significant bag for podcasting. He's just doing it because he likes the attention. I mean, the man just signed a 5-year max deal. I mean, Paul George has made $354 million in his career. Go learn how to invest that money or something, bro. Like, you don't need more attention on you. At the end of the day, there's a part of me that feels like the reason why Paul George has been so terrible this year isn't because he doesn't care. It could have just been because he was injured. But it's the fact that he's also podcasting while he's having his worst year of his career with a bunch of his yes men that just rubs a lot of fans the wrong way. Now, the crazy part about this is apparently the Philadelphia 76ers are going to try to trade Paul George this summer. And it wouldn't surprise me because this situation is eerily reminiscent to what the Philadelphia 76ers went through 6 years ago with Al Horford. And it's such an interesting situation. I mean, it's practically identical. Following the 2018-19 season, the Philadelphia 76ers had a very difficult decision to make. You see, on one hand, we have Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris, and these two wings were very instrumental into getting us into the second round of the playoffs, where there was a chance that we could have potentially went to the Eastern Conference Finals if this didn't happen.
Is this the dagger?
So you would think conventional wisdom would suggest that they would decide to bring back Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler, but for some reason, they just brought back Tobias Harris because they thought Jimmy Butler was too old. And the thing that's a little interesting about this is they let a 30-year-old Jimmy Butler go to the Miami Heat, and they used that additional capital to sign a 33-year-old Al Horford because Joel Embiid always got his kicked whenever he faced off against Al Horford. So Al Horford would join the Philadelphia 76ers. It was a nightmare in terms of fit. I mean, the statistics won't show, but he was just not good on the Philadelphia 76ers. And then Daryl Morey would get hired and immediately set out to trade Al Horford and get rid of his salary. He got traded to the OKC Thunder, where he rode the bench. Eventually, he got traded to the Boston Celtics in the Kemba Walker trade. He's been there ever since. And by the way, he's still playing well to this day. And it seems like the Sixers are in the exact same situation with Paul George. So there's a huge question that they need to ask themselves. Does Paul George just suck, or has he been hampered by injuries? At the end of the day, I don't know if they could trade Paul George if they really wanted to, because if you do trade him, you're not going to get the value that he deserves because he has one of the craziest contracts in the entire NBA. So I think they have no choice but to run it back with him. But hey, if there's a team that might take a chance on him and that has a penchant for making terrible decisions, it would be Nico Harrison and the Dallas Mavericks. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about the Paul George situation? Aside from that, I don't know if you guys heard, but Kevin Durant's future is not looking very good. We have a completely separate video, and I'll leave it in the end screen to meet you guys there. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.